This is the story of two people who started work in the early 1960s who are now retired. They share with us their experience of working life and pension planning over a 40-year period.
Yeah, the 60s for me. 50s, 60s, I got a job and was lucky to get one, I can tell you. An awful of my pals had to emigrate. Stayed in it, liked it, met a girl who was a civil servant and went out with her. We decided to get married. The big problem was, at that time, she had to get out of the civil service. So no two salary families in those days. So we had to cope on one salary.
Well, then we'd have a holiday. You know, we'd have a holiday in the summertime. You go maybe down to Court Town or somewhere like that, or up north, up to Donegal, or places like that.
Again, times were tough, but so they were for everyone.
You know, we hadn't money to burn. You know, I'm not suggesting that, but we were happy in ourselves.
Well, how did I get started with pension? Well, I was only a wet day in the place when I had a visit from, I don't think it was the personnel or HR man those days, the accountant or whoever he was. And he seemed to me to be ancient. He was only about 40, I think. But he sat me down and told me I should be looking to the future. I should join the company pension scheme, which at that time apparently was optional. You went into it or you didn't.
The idea was, you know, they'd pay half, or I can't remember the exact thing, maybe a third, and we'd pay 2/3 the other way around. They deduct it from the salary, and you know, at age 65 or whatever was the retiring age, then we would have this pension, which was a attractive idea, you know. I mean, it was an attractive idea, but at the time it didn't seem to, you know, I mean, 65, go on, you know. It didn't seem to me to be a priority.
So, despite my misgivings, I went with it. I said, okay, will you take it out of my wages, which they did. Now, I have to admit, if they had come to me every week to take the money from my fist, I mightn't have gone with it. But I reckoned what you haven't got, you don't miss.
They used to come back every now and then to me, you know, and they'd say, look, John, have you made your mind up about that? You know, I mean, you know, sort of time's going on, and, you know, it was 3 years ago, you know, we spoke to you, you know. And they'd say things like that to me, you know, and I'd sort of laugh it off, and I'd say, well, okay, leave it with me, you know.
Things of the sea, wishing wells, wedding bells, early morning dew.
The 60s came and went, and the 70s, God, the 70s, when I think. The country went mad with inflation. Every day something went up, a fierce hike. Kids grew up. That's when I think the expensive time came. School books were a curse, and every year they changed. And again, you had to cut back on something. Pension thing was still there, and we said, we're not going to touch it. We've invested, at that stage, I'd invested maybe 15 years of it, and I said, that's there, I don't even notice it.
I could see in the back of my mind, if you like, the sense, the reality of the situation, that wouldn't it be nice, you know, some stage that when you had no other income that this was there, but it didn't register as a priority.
We laughed at the idea of ever being decrepit, as we thought. Now, in those days, when we were 25, there were no phrases to describe. There was no senior citizen or golden years or golden oldies. A pensioner is what you were, you know?
I mean, when I was in my 40s and 50s, I mean, I was everywhere. I was here, there, and everywhere. You know, I had a great time. I wasn't really concerned about things like when I'm 64. You know, that wasn't something that was in my mind. You know, I was just trying to see how I could get down for the floorball on Saturday, you know.
I think having the pension meant that when I was in my 50s, say, and that I didn't have to make a major saving spurt for my pension age when I wouldn't have a pension, I knew I could cope.
So the kids who are now finishing college, you know, getting on with their own things. I did get involved in a pension at that point in time, but of course I only had it for 5 or 6 years, so, you know. I did it. I did do it, but it didn't really add up to much when the time came.
A friend of mine this is by the way, but I think it's relevant. I grew up with him, and I went into the company at the same time as him, and I knocked around with him, and he didn't want to know this, you know. And for a moment, I nearly succumbed to peer pressure with him and said, no, I won't bother. You know, he do say, oh, I'll win the pools or something, or maybe tomorrow. But God, I don't think he ever did. And I'm still a friend of his, and the family are friends, but I think he went into it very late, in his late 50s, when it wasn't worth much, you know. And that's, I have some problems now in that we used to go on holidays together as a family, but now I don't want to broach it because I'm not so sure how he's fixed financially. So it's caused a bit of a, not a strain, but, you know, a reluctance on my part to suggest we do this or we go that.
There it is. I mean, I retired, and here I was with this sort of what you'd call top-up pension from the pension fund, not very much money. I had the contributory state pension with the various allowances that go with that, sort of free television and license and some contribution towards electricity and things of that nature. So suddenly you're in a situation where you're down to 20% of your income. Now this comes as something of a shock, indeed. You know, you have been going along, you know, the usual, and then the reality sets in. But of course, you do adjust, and you do get on with it.
The day I retired, I felt it was like Independence Day. I was my own boss. I had ample money to live on, and ample in the sense of having enough to live on, and a margin above that for any contingencies, a very healthy margin. I say that to you straight. We have a little place in Spain, and we try to go over there a couple of times a year. Christmas and the rest of the year, family time, and my own boss, king of the castle.
We go on train journeys and that sort of thing. And I'm not unhappy, and I love the garden. I like working the garden, which is fine. I still can play the odd bit of golf.
I have to thank that man, when I think of him, the accountant, whom I thought was ancient at the time. He gave me very good advice. And luckily and thankfully, I took it. It has enabled me to be, as I say, totally independent.
It is a change from the way it was, and one can't ignore that. And I think really what happens is that you are no longer independent, you become dependent. And that is a pretty substantial change in your way of life.